Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be filming how I annotate, why I annotate, just everything about book annotating. So I have already done 2 videos on how I annotate in the past, but my method has changed a little bit, not too much, but a little bit, and I do still constantly get questions about how I annotate and why I annotate and all that. So for my new viewers, I thought I'd make this, and also I kind of don't like those 2 videos, so I just wanted to have a fresh new annotation video that I can refer people to when they ask about my annotating. So yeah, so I'm going to talk about how I annotate, why I annotate, my annotating supplies. I'm going to answer some questions from you guys asking me about my annotating. Okay, so why do I annotate? If you watch my vlogs, you see me writing in my books, underlining books, tabbing books, all that. So I do like to tab up my books like so. And some people are like, what are you doing? So basically I like to write down my thoughts in books as I'm reading. I like to mark my favorite moments, mark significant moments. I just really love to personalize my books and make it my own by writing down all my thoughts. I also feel like it enhances the reading experience because I just really get immersed into the book. I just love being able to go through a read book of mine and flipping through, seeing my tabs and annotations, and it kind of brings me back to that time when I was reading the book, more so than if I didn't have anything written down. I also just love being able to quickly go to a tab and see what moment I marked. It also helps if you review books because you can easily just go back to moments that you tabbed if you want to include that in your review and stuff like that. It's also helpful for series. So obviously with series it takes a year or longer for the next book to be published, so you can forget what happens during that year-long plus period. So obviously you could just reread the book, but if you don't have time or if you don't want to, you can just easily flip through the book and go to the moments you tabbed, and that will usually give you a refresher on the key moments. Another reason I love annotating is it can act like a diary, because if you read a book that is very personal to you and you relate to in a lot of ways, you can really write down why you connect to certain aspects, and it can be really cathartic. Well, I found it's really cathartic, and yeah, like I said, it just really makes it more personal, which I just really love. I just love making my things more personal to me, and I do aspire to have my own personal collection of books, so my own personal library. So that is another reason I just know I'm not going to be getting rid of these books, which is a thing I should note. You obviously need to keep in mind that if you're annotating a book, you can't sell it, or if you do, it will be at a very reduced price. And another downfall is if a friend wants to borrow a book but it's a really personal book to you that you've written a lot of personal annotations in and you don't really want to share it, you might not want to lend them the book. I definitely have a few books in my collection that I wouldn't want anyone to really read. So yeah, I think those are the main reasons why I annotate. So now I'll get into how I annotate, so all the things I use to annotate. But before I get into anything, I just want to say you can always work your way up to annotating. You don't have to go right in if you don't feel comfortable writing in your book. You can start with a pencil, or you can start by just writing on post-it notes. You can even get one of those pens that you can erase. I think it's like the Pilot Friction pen or something like that. And of course you can just start with tabbing only. So I have my annotation pencil case here. This is a random like makeup bag thing that I got off this website ages ago, but I can't remember which website, so I'm very sorry. But it's just a simple black bag. But the reason I really love it is because it has 2 zips, so it perfectly fits my tabs at the front, my sticky tabs at the front, and then in the back I have all of my pens and everything. So I'll go through all of these now, but I just also wanted to show you my cute little bat pin that I put on my pencil case. So these are the tabs that I use. These tabs are from Daiso, so every time I go to Daiso I like to stock up on these tabs because a lot of the time they're also sold out, and they're just my absolute favorites because on one side it has a ruler and it has 6 colors, and these colors are perfect for me and I just really love the color scheme. I also just love these tabs because they're not too sticky to the point where if you pull it off it will peel the text from the page. Sometimes when I peel it off a page, some of the text is on the sticky tab, but it's only a little bit and it doesn't completely take it off the page. Like you can still completely see the text on the page. And I know that Amazon do sell this same color scheme, but it doesn't have the ruler, but I'll leave it linked down below. So yeah, all of these colors coordinate to certain things. So each color means the same thing for pretty much any book I annotate, but I do change it every now and then for specific books, so I'll talk about that in a second. But first I'll just talk about my basic methods. So green means angry, so I use this to tab angry moments. So it could just be I'm angry at what's happening in the book and I'm supposed to be as a reader, or it could be I'm angry that this was even written, so something I find problematic or something like that. Then orange is for relatable, so something that I personally relate to. Yellow means important information, so this is usually to do with the world. So in fantasy it usually means like important world building that I need to remember, or it could be important information to do with a character. Pink means love, so I use pink to tab moments that I really love. So if I have a favorite scene, then I'll tab it. I also tab it for my favorite quotes, and pink is definitely the color that I run out the quickest. Blue is for sad, so I tab sad moments. That's pretty self-explanatory. Dark purple is for shocking, so this could be like a plot twist, so one book could have literally only one dark purple tab, but if it's a book with heaps of different shocking moments, then it could have multiple. And purple is for funny, so anything I find funny I will tab. So yeah, that is my basic method that I use for most books. There are two reasons I would change it slightly. So the first reason is if I'm reading non-fiction or poetry, I don't really feel the need to have all these different categories, so if I just want to tab something to look back on later, I will just use one color, and the color will usually just be a color that I think looks best with that book specifically. The second reason is if I'm reading a fantasy and there is too much world building going on, so I have too many yellow tabs and I don't like the look of it, especially because most of the time fantasy has a dark cover and I don't love the look of heaps of yellow with the dark cover, so I usually swap yellow for dark purple. So sometimes in some fantasy books you'll see a lot of dark purple, which would mean important information. So that is just for aesthetic purposes. Also, this is just a little thing, but I wanted to mention it. When I stick in my tabs, I like to line it up with the text. I know some people even go as far as lining it up with a ruler. I definitely don't go to that level. I just feel like that's such an effort, but I don't just stick in the tab like that because otherwise it would just be messy, and I personally don't want that. So I like the tabs to all be in line. So when I put a tab in a page, I always line it up with the text so it's straight. And I used to keep quite a lot of the tab outside of the book. So as you can see, my copy of Crooked Kingdom, the tabs are sticking out quite far. And this is just a little thing, but recently I realized I don't love this look. So recently I've been sticking them out only just a little bit, and I try to keep each tab the same size going out of the book. I don't know how to explain it, but you know what I mean. Once again, that's just for aesthetic purposes. So I also like to highlight and underline in my books. So usually when I'm tabbing something, it will correspond with the same pen color. So these are the pens that I use for writing inside my book. So these are the Staedtler Tri-Plus Fine Liner, and these are just my favorite ones for books specifically. The pages in every book are different, so some books have really nice thick pages and some books have really thin pages. So these pens can bleed through depending on how thick the page is. I personally don't care about that. Like, I don't mind a bit of bleed through. They definitely don't bleed through that much, but if you're really concerned about the pen bleeding through, I probably wouldn't recommend these. But I really love these pens. I just feel like they write really well on most book pages, and I love how they have a nice color selection. So yeah, I have all the colors here. So actually, I don't know what this dark blue is doing here. I don't ever use that. So they correspond to the tab colors. So I have green, I have my orange, I have my yellow, I have my pink, blue, dark purple I don't actually have, but I usually just use black to underline when I'm doing a dark purple moment. And then of course I just have regular purple. I also have this black pen, which is the Papermate Ink Joy Gel 0.7, and this is just my favorite standard black gel pen because it's really quick drying and I just really love it. So I also just use this to write in my book if I just want to write in black, because a lot of the time nowadays I actually just write my thoughts in my black pen and use the colored pens for underlining only. So yeah, most of the time I use these pens to underline. So I will use this ruler to underline and then use the corresponding tab color to tab it. But also sometimes I underline things but it's not significant enough for me to tab, so just because I underline something doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to tab it. So yes, I have those pens, but then I also have some highlighters. So these are just some Faber-Castell highlighters. So these are the Faber-Castell Super Fluorescent highlighters. I never used to highlight in my books. I definitely prefer to underline simply because I feel like I have more control underlining and it just looks more aesthetically pleasing in my opinion. It definitely is harder for me to get a straight line with highlighters, but I have been highlighting recently, and what makes me choose highlighting over underlining, I honestly can't tell you why. It's just a vibe I get with a certain book. So some books I'm like, you know, I think I'm gonna highlight you rather than underline. So I can't really explain that, but it's the same method with underlining. I just highlight significant moments. So pink would be a moment I love or a quote I love, yellow would be important information, green would be angry, and blue would be a sad moment. So obviously I don't have all the colors here, so if I was highlighting and I had a funny moment, I would just use my purple pen, and that's because I've only recently gotten into highlighting. If I get more into highlighting and I want it to just be my main thing, I would get more highlighters, but for now I'm happy with this mix. Another reason I would choose highlighting over underlining is if I'm in a time crunch and I need to finish a book by a certain time and I'm kind of stressing out. Highlighting is definitely quicker than underlining, because with underlining you have to like get the ruler in the perfect position, and you know, it takes some time to like underline, especially if you're doing a whole paragraph. But highlighting is obviously much quicker. So if you don't know, I have a Patreon, and on there we do monthly buddy reads. So sometimes I want to quickly finish a book so I can get the vlog up in time and everything. So in those situations I would probably use annotating, because I want to, you know, quickly get it done and I need to highlight significant moments in order to talk about it. Also, if you're traveling, so if you're on a train and you're physically reading a book, it can be annoying to get your pencil case out and underline, especially if it's shaky. So if I'm traveling and I still want to annotate a book, I will actually just get my phone notes app and then write down the page number and the corresponding color. So if one of my favorite scenes happened on page 50, I will write page 50 pink. And when I get home, I will open the notes app, see all the pages I need to annotate, go to page 50, and then usually I will remember what I wanted to tab. So another thing I like to use in my books are post-it notes. So I'll usually choose a different color depending on the book. I'll choose the color based on the aesthetic of the cover and all that. But yeah, just some standard post-it notes. So I like to use post-it notes in my books every 50 or 100 pages, and I will choose whether it's going to be 50 or 100 pages based on what kind of book it is. So with fantasy books, where a lot usually happens, I will put a post-it note every 50 pages because, like I said, a lot happens. But if I was reading a contemporary, I would probably put a post-it note every 100 pages because not as much usually happens. So I use these post-it notes to summarize what has happened in the past 50 or 100 pages. So before I start reading a book, I usually put the post-it notes in the book already. So I'll grab the book, go to the 50 page mark, put a post-it note, go to the 100 page mark, put another post-it note. Yeah, so every 50 pages. And while I'm reading, I like to just write key things that has happened within those pages on the post-it note. And even though I'm already tabbing the significant moments, it's nice to have a quick summary that you can easily refer to. I also, on these post-it notes, write how I'm feeling about the story or just any of my overall thoughts. So I would say something like, oh, I'm really loving this story so far. It had a really strong start. I've already fallen in love with the characters, something like that. Because without the post-it note, I wouldn't really have a place for me to write my overall thoughts. But obviously this is extra work, so I don't always use the post-it notes, but I do a lot of the time. Another thing I usually do is at the front of a book, this is the book I'm currently reading, I have like a little card that has characters. So I usually just like to write down the main characters and write a little bit about them. So for example, Spencer is the main character in this book, so I wrote nickname, Spin, her dad called her that, and then I put in quotations strange because that is how she's been described, and I just wrote she's determined to prove herself. So I just like to quickly describe the character so I can keep track of all the characters. This can be so helpful, especially in fantasy where there can be like millions of characters. I usually also have another card that has like important information about the world. So, you know, if there's a specific term that is used in this world, I'll write it down and explain the meaning. It's kind of just like a nice cheat sheet to have in case you forgot, and you can easily just refer back to it. So yeah, like I said, this is the book that I'm currently reading, and I'm not using the post-it note method for this book because this is my Patreon buddy read book. So I want to make sure I really have enough notes to be able to discuss it and everything. So I need more room than just the post-it notes. So if I'm reading a book for a book club, I will usually actually put a page for every 100 pages. So this is just a page I ripped out of a notebook, like an old notebook, and I just stick it in the book using some washi tape because washi tape is obviously not super adhesive, so you can easily pull it off without damaging the book. So here is where I just write favorite quotes, and then I write the page numbers because usually on my Patreon post updates I like to mention my favorite quotes, so having the page numbers there is just really easy to be able to refer to. And I write down the same things that I would write on a post-it note, it just has more room. I also like to put a post-it note or card or whatever at the end of the book, and this is where I write my star rating and my overall mini review of the book. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how I annotate audiobooks. It took me a while to figure out how to do it because obviously it's kind of hard, but if I have the physical book of the audiobook that I'm reading and I want to annotate it, I usually just keep my bookmark in my book and make sure that I always know where I'm at in the physical book alongside the audiobook. So I will always keep my bookmark in the right place in the physical book. For example, I'm on chapter 12 of Skyward and I am listening to the audiobook for this. So once I continue listening to the audiobook, once I get to chapter 13, I will move my bookmark to chapter 13, like straight away. And obviously you can't always do this if you're in the middle or something, but I try to do it as much as possible. So if something happens during chapter 12 that I want to tab, I will just honestly just try to find it on the page. And if the chapters are short, they should be pretty easy. If they're long, obviously that's when it gets a bit annoying, but usually it's not too hard to find the quote or whatever that you wanted to tab in that chapter. Otherwise, with audiobooks, I will just forget about tabbing and writing my book, and I will just have the sticky notes every 50 or 100 pages, and while I'm listening to the audiobook, I will just write down the significant things that have happened, and that is how I kind of summarize what's going on and how I'm feeling throughout the book. Okay, so lastly, how I annotate graphic novels and manga. So I don't usually annotate graphic novels and manga. I definitely never write in them. I just personally don't want to, but I definitely will tab my favorite moments if I feel the need. So I'll just put the tab in, but I won't write anything. But obviously because I have my color system, I know my feeling at that moment. But one thing I do like to do is put 2 sticky notes at the beginning of the graphic novel or manga. I'm just trying to cover it because of spoilers, but yeah, so I like to put 2 sticky notes. So one is for writing down my rating and my mini review of the volume or the graphic novel, and then the other sticky note is to summarize the key things that happened in the book or volume. Okay, so I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about, so now I'm going to move on to questions. So I did ask on Twitter if you had any questions about annotating that you'd like me to answer, and I got quite a few questions, so I'll try to answer as many as I can now. Have you ever regretted annotating a book? Yes, I have. I have one book in particular, Tiger Lily. If you remember, I read that book and I really hated it, even though I thought I was gonna love it. And because I hated it, I didn't want it in my collection. Like every time I looked at it, it annoyed me, but I'd already annotated it, so I couldn't really give it away or donate it or anything like that. So I definitely did regret that. But like I said, I thought I was gonna love that book. So after that experience, I realized I only wanted to annotate books after I had read around 50 pages, because after reading 50 pages, I would hopefully know whether I'm going to really love the story or not. But if it's a book that for some reason I just 100% know I'm gonna love, I will just annotate from the beginning. But if I'm not sure, I won't. So with arcs, actually, I don't think I mentioned this, but I don't actually write in my arcs, and that is because obviously it's an advanced reader copy, which means not many people have read it, so I can't really see from other people's reviews if it's going to be a book for me. So that's the reason I don't really annotate arcs, but I do the post-it method with arcs as well as tabbing. And actually after I read an arc that I've tabbed but haven't written in and I really loved it, I will usually transfer the tabs into my finished copy and write my thoughts. Okay, the next question, do you ever feel overwhelmed by the act of doing it or find yourself not doing it sometimes? If so, how do you counteract it? Or do you decide along the way if it is something you want to annotate, or just do all books? So I definitely don't annotate every single book that I read. Sometimes you're just not bothered, so I won't annotate if I don't feel like it. Because if you try to force yourself to annotate every book you read, I can definitely see you getting in a reading slump, because as soon as you have any sort of pressure on yourself to do with reading, it most likely means you're not going to have fun. So yeah, I definitely don't put pressure on myself. I just do it because I enjoy it. But like I said, I'm not always in the mood to annotate. So if I'm not in the mood, I'm not going to annotate. Another reason I won't annotate is if I have been reading a story and I have been annotating the whole time, but then I get near the end and a lot is happening and I don't want to stop reading to write something down, I will just let it be and read and finish the book. And sometimes I'll go back and write down my thoughts, but you know, I think the main thing is just don't put pressure on yourself to do it, because then it's not fun. So yeah, I'm definitely really chill about it, so I think that is the way to be, because otherwise it can be exhausting. So quite a few people were asking what I write in my book, and like I said, it's just my thoughts, so it could literally just be a simple ew. Like if I'm disgusted by something, just any thought that I'm thinking while I'm reading, I'll just write it down. Have you ever messed up while underlining, like you lost control of your hand and accidentally marked the page outside the text? I completely know what you mean, and yes, it's happened quite a few times, but I'm just really chill when it comes to my books. Like obviously I don't want someone to completely write all over the page, but I'm not like super strict with keeping it in like pristine condition with perfect lines and all that. I definitely do try to do that, but if I don't have a stable surface and I try to underline and then it, you know, goes wonky, I'm just like, oh, whatever. Okay, so someone said, I'm new to annotating books. Did you ever get scared annotating your first book? What do you use to do so? So we already talked about what I use, and also love you too. But yeah, I definitely was scared to annotate, especially in the beginning, and I feel like a lot of it is because in the book community, not as much anymore, but there still are some people who are like, oh, you're a monster if you write in your book. And it's like, okay, everyone can do what they want with their own property. Like it's your book. If you want to write all over it, you can. So there definitely are those people in the community which can make you feel like you're doing something so bad, but you know, like if you want to do it, do it. But yes, I was scared at first because I didn't really see many others doing it, so it was a bit intimidating, but I've always loved the idea of annotating books, so I eased myself into it by writing on post-it notes first, and then I slowly got comfortable to actually write on the page. So yeah, I definitely just recommend, you know, slowly easing into it if you're scared. Okay, so Katie said, I'm really interested in annotating books, but I'm worried it will take me out of the story. Does this happen for you? So it definitely can. Like I said before, if I'm in a really action-packed scene, I usually won't stop to annotate. I will just, you know, continue reading, because if I'm in a really intense scene, I just want to keep reading. So yeah, I definitely can, but most of the time, no. So Nicole asked, when you're rereading a book you annotated a lot, do the annotations bother you or get in the way at all? No, it's the complete opposite. I get excited to reread a book that I've annotated because I love to read my past selves thoughts. So I actually think it makes it an even more enjoyable rereading experience, because not only do I get to reread a book that I really love, I get to relive my first or second time reading it, and I can see if my thoughts have changed. So it honestly doesn't bother me at all. I absolutely love it. And sometimes I'll even completely change my opinion on something, and I'll write next to my old annotation like, wow, my old self was stupid, this is not what I think anymore, sort of thing. So it's just really fun. And obviously it can kind of get in the way, so if you're reading and then there's a post-it note, I obviously have to peel it off, but that's not really a big deal. So Lana asked, how do you know something is worthy of being annotated / underlined? Sometimes I feel like I annotate stuff that didn't need to be underlined / tabbed. So I definitely get the vibe from a lot of the replies to my tweets that people are just being way too hard on themselves. Who cares if you're underlining too many things or highlighting too many things? No one is going to look at it and judge you and say, wow, why did you highlight the whole book? If it's something that you personally want to highlight, like, go for it. That's the mindset that I have. If I feel the need to highlight it, then I will. It's your own book, you can do what you want with it, so it's just your own feeling of if you want to highlight it or not. Do I open up a new tab package every time you run out of a color? I go through pink so fast. I go through pink so fast too. So I do, because I usually always need pink, and I just wish they would sell a pack of pink only, because I actually have so many old tab packets of all the colors except for pink, because I ran out of pink, so I needed to open a new one, and I put the old one in a different pencil case. So I literally have this pencil case filled with old tabs with no pink. And I don't know how to fix that situation, because I just really love the pink tab color. Like, I obviously could swap pink for a different color for certain books, but I just really love the pink, you know. So yeah, Daiso, please sell pink only. That would be my dream come true. Okay, do I have a separate journal to put my favorite quotes in? I don't have a specific journal for book quotes, but I do have a reading journal. I have a journaling channel, if you don't know. So in that reading journal every month, I have a page of my favorite quotes of the month. So this is when the tabs also really come in handy, because when I want to put in one of my favorite quotes, I can just go to the pink tabs and see which quotes were my absolute favorite of the month and put them in my journal. So that is where I keep my favorite book quotes. How do I annotate books like The Starless Sea, where the edges are sprayed so beautifully? I did start The Starless Sea ages ago, but I haven't finished it, so I'm literally on page like 20 or something. But I did start tabbing it, because even though yes, it has stunning sprayed edges, I think it would still look good with the tabs. But another thing you could do is put the tabs on top, so you can still see the stunning sprayed edges. I'd like to know if you've ever wanted another color to use because you're experiencing a different feeling that you don't have as a color. In that situation, I will usually just underline it in black and write down my thought. And if I want to tab it, I'll just kind of choose a color to tab, but that doesn't happen too often. Okay, so those are all the questions. I've been filming for so long. There's just so much information, and I really hope I explained myself well. So if you have any other questions that I didn't answer, please leave it below. I'll try to answer them. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're having a good day or night, and I'll see you in my next one.